and welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin, and I believe it's our 252nd show, correct, Dr. Lopkin?
I believe you're right. Yes.
Very good. We are on the proverbial roll. Um, so, speaking of someone that's not on a roll, that's President Biden, but he's also, like most liberal Democrats, even though I don't think he's actually in charge, has an anti-Israeli, possibly an anti-Semitic um, um, view or bent, and he refuses to meet with President of Israel Netanyahu, just like his predecessor um, did as well.
Well, let's clarify that statement. By predecessor, you're referring to Obama, because
Obama, sorry, yes.
yes,
No,
because
no, no. Trump was
Trump,
extremely good to Israel. No, I'm
yes,
talking about Obama was very bad to Israel, and one of the one that propped up and made Iran who they are today. Underreported story, but 1,000% correct for many reasons. We won't get into why, but definitely true.
yes, it is, and it is. I mean, the anti-Semitic, anti-Israeli movement in the Democratic Party really started under Obama, and
No
Biden is
question.
just picked up the baton and and he's running with it. Well, he's stumbling with it.
Well, no, his handlers picked up the baton. I increasingly think that he doesn't really know what day it is. And I'm not being facetious. I'm saying that he's just told what to read, even when he had meetings, in the NATO meetings, he has a cheat sheet. It's it's sad and scary.
It is sad and scary, especially when you saw the footage of him being led around the palace by King Charles. I mean, it was so obvious that he was completely out of it. And
Without any question.
and this is
And
this is
talking
what
to one of the palace guards, that's something maybe a sixth grader does because everyone else knows they're not going to talk.
yeah, it's an he's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment to the US. It's embarrassing to see how the foreign leaders react to him. And yeah, he had the NATO meeting, blew off the final dinner because he was sunsetting and his mind was gone. This is not leadership. We are rudderless in this country.
Without any question, you have the entrenched state leading things. He is not in control. And, people talked about, well, he had a full schedule. That's why he left NATO. No, not at all. He was on the beach, like you said, sunsetting. And I think it wasn't because he was tired. It's because his handlers knew that if he was left on a table by himself, the chances of him saying something controversial, detrimental, the list goes on, would be about 100%. At this point, he's so mentally destroyed.
Yes, there is a reason that Biden does not do public events after 4 p.m. He is mentally unable to handle it. And they can try to hide it all they want, but it's obvious every time he comes out. If he's not specifically scripted and handled and brought around, as soon as he's on his own, he's gone.
Yes, I know, but I guess my real big question, maybe you can shed some light on, as I get it. You watch Fox, you watch Newsmax, but are people? Do you think people are getting that message? Do you think it's resonating to
I
the
think
average person?
I think it is because you're actually seeing more and more media coverage of very liberal groups coming out and saying he's not capable of running for another term. We saw
Okay, so
the
what happens? What happens? I agree with you, and I think that's good that more people are understanding this. But what's the end game, or is it too early to know?
I think it's too early to know. I think in the ideal situation, he makes the announcement that he's not going to run for a second term like Lyndon Johnson did. Kamala Harris, of course, will throw her hat in the ring, but once she does that, Gavin Newsom will put his hat in the ring. There's about four or five others who will jump into the ring if Biden is not run running again. So they'll actually have to have a primary. And I'll be honest, if they have a primary with more than three or four candidates, I think RFK has the momentum to take it.
I think the only reason he doesn't so-called take it is because he's being marginalized and he's being shut out. And also with mainstream media, I love this because I have some liberal friends, and they liberals aren't usually the smartest, the brightest, although they claim to be the brightest. They're actually not. They're very good followers. So MSNBC and probably CNN has branded RFK Jr. as a vaccine whack job when that's not the case. And they just take that label and without any investigation, without any, probing of if that is true or not, they accept it. And like a good Stalinist foot soldier, that's their marching orders.
Well,
So
remember,
they did an effective job in marginalizing.
remember they did the same thing with the Steele dossier. They said Trump was colluding. The liberals all believed it. Now, of course, all the evidence is in, and it was a scam paid for by Hillary Clinton, but the liberals bought it. They said COVID
Because they
started
wanted to buy it.
right. COVID started naturally in a fruit market from bats.
Sure, happens all
And
the time.
and now the facts have come out. The first three people that got COVID were all workers in that lab. We find that the intelligence people that said, oh, that's Russian disinformation with the Hunter laptop, they never looked at the laptop. They just said it, and everybody bought it. This is what the Democrats have been doing for years. And it amazes me how people still fall for it, even after being proven wrong over and over.
I think it's because they want to believe. And I also think it's very sad. You talk about moderate Democrats. I'm not so sure about that to a big percentage of the party anymore. But I believe that RFK represents the old Democratic Party that has no place in the new Democratic Party because he's sane, he's somewhere in the middle, and someone that could actually unite the country. AOC would have no interest in RFK Jr.
No, of course not. But AOC has no interest in facts. AOC is a moron. I mean,
Well, she's the de facto leader of the Democratic Party.
I don't
I mean,
actually
Biden's
think
getting a lot of his
I don't
marching
I
orders.
don't I don't actually think she is. I don't think she has anything to do with the leadership of the Democratic Party. I think if you're going to put a shadow leader in place, if anybody, it's Bernie Sanders. AOC hasn't gotten anything out of committee. She has proven to be completely worthless. Nancy Pelosi kept slapping her down over and over again. She has no pull in the party. She has pull on social media. That's it.
Well, a lot of young people get their information from there. I think she is a social media celebrity who happens to be a congressperson. That's
Yes.
about the best articulation of where she is. Now, we did talk about anti Semitism, and our self-hating Jews at Ben and Jerry's had a promotion. The month, the ice cream month of July, and that melted down. And people are still speculating: are they the next? I hope they are. Bud Light. It's looking that way. They're bleeding money from their parent company, Unilever.
Yeah, Unilever is not happy with Ben and Jerry at this point. For those of our listeners who might have missed the tweet, they tweeted on, I believe it was Jerry actually, that tweeted on the 4th of July how all of the land taken from the Native Americans should be returned to them. And we shouldn't be proud of this country because we live on stolen land, and Mount Rushmore should be the first thing that's returned. Well, what's really funny is that not long after this tweet, a Native American tribe in Vermont came out and said, well, why don't you start with the stolen land that the Ben and Jerry's ice cream factory is based on?
I thought that
And,
was amazingly great,
yeah, and of course,
interesting.
they were
But
quiet about that.
yeah, but isn't it the whole thing? We've talked about this for now going on years. It's do as I say, not as I do. I'm sure Ben and Jerry are multi million, like worth probably 100 million, 50 million easily, right?
Sure.
And they can say any shit. They don't even give a shit about the sales anymore. They've already made. They're already living in their gated community.
Right. They sold the brand to Unilever. They don't care what happens to the sales. Unilever, however, does. And sales have been dropping.
I'd say that again.
I said Ben and Jerry don't care what happens
Yep,
to
I
the
got
ice
that.
cream sales. Unilever, who actually owns the ice cream company, they care about what happens, and those sales are dropping. And I
Yeah, they're
think
plummeting actually.
Unilever has actually legal ramifications to this. You know, they left Ben and Jerry's board pretty much independent, but given that Ben and Jerry are tanking Unilever's stock price, I think they've got a case for stock manipulation.
Oh, they're going to have to do something because I don't, woke corporate, I get all that, but it's still stockholder value. And these guys are, every time they open their fat mouths, it's either, boycotting Israel. There is something, like you
Yeah,
said, I thought that was genius. There's something in the Vermont water. Bernie
yeah.
Sanders, self hating Jew, and the Ben and Jerry's despicable, I won't even say.
See, now there is a big difference though between Bud Light and Ben and Jerry's, and you'll see it in the protests and the complaints because Bud Light, Anheuser-Busch, is an American company. So they have certain responsibilities to their stockholders under the law. They have to deal with American backlash under the law. Unilever is a Dutch company. The laws are different there. I don't think anybody in the Netherlands cares what Ben and Jerry says, so they're not going to be boycotting. It's a different audience.
Okay, but their major market is still the United States.
For Ben
And
and
how
Jerry's,
dumb
yes.
can you be? Yes. How dumb can you be on the 4th of July? You insulated phony, which they both are. Go follow the dead and do some more acid. Okay, both of them are fat losers and they know nothing about what they're talking about. Sometimes in life you get lucky. They were burnt out hippies in Vermont who happen to make ice cream because they were incapable of anything else. There you go.
Well, but look at it. For the most part, Ben and Jerry are essentially irrelevant. They don't have any say over what the company does. They sold the company. You know, they've got their money, but they don't actually do anything anymore. They don't have any kind of real impact anymore. So they do these things to feel relevant. I mean, look, they got us talking about them. That's all they wanted. They want the attention.
I agree with you 100%. They're like petulant little child. They were spoiled brats, I would assume. Probably went to some bullshit school in Vermont, smoked a lot of pot, and then just hung on their fat asses and made ice cream. But anyway, enough of them. Talking about political correctness, Mike Love, the lead singer. By the way, believe it or not, I saw the Beach Boys 2 years ago. I thought they were excellent, quite frankly. But anyway, Mike Love, the lead singer of the Beach Boys, was about to sing Surfer Girl. He made a joke. He goes, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble because it's not gender neutral. And everyone started laughing. And I thought that was, it's not a serious thing, but I thought that was pretty. I think people are starting to, there's a backlash brewing. The Beach Boys audience, they're probably older, and they just know this whole thing's pathetic anyway. Your thoughts? Not a big deal, but I thought it was funny.
Yeah, you are seeing a backlash against all of this. Um, Comedians, especially, have been coming out against political correctness. Entertainers are starting to go, all right, this cancel culture is ridiculous. And little by little, you're starting to see in the media people speaking out. Now, people have been speaking out against it outside the media for quite a while. And you're seeing what's really big is parents and suburban moms coming out against this, all the gender neutral stuff, all of the the ridiculousness of not saying he or she or her or him. And you're starting to see the left lose it to the point. I'm forgetting the name of the mother's political group, but one far left wacko congressperson tweeted that they're assholes with casseroles. They're the Taliban in minivans. It's like, no, these are parents speaking up for a better world for their children, and the left is just losing it, resorting to name calling.
No, I think you have a great point. I think what's the left is overdoing it. They're getting a so-called bridge too far. Again, it started. We talked about this before. Started out with gay rights. Everyone's on board with that. I don't know anyone unless you're a nutcase has no problem with gay men. Go. Life's hard enough. If you're gay and you're happy, clap your hands. It's all good. But then it goes way over the top, and I think they're their constant need to push the envelope brings it to a boiling point.
Well, again, I've spoken to a number of gay rights activists, and they are actually infuriated by this situation because it's not the folks who are fighting for gay rights. They've been fighting for gay rights for 40 years. They finally gotten to a place where they're happy with things. And it's the far radical trans community that's dragging the uh, I'm going to say LGB community into all of this. And you're starting to see gay activists speak out against the trans community. Martina Navratilova came out and said, this is ridiculous. You cannot allow biological men to compete against women. So you're
Isn't that kind
start
of common sense? I mean, and that's how it's interesting to me that the Democrats always say they're the party of science, but they still think that men can menstruate. That's why in some schools they actually have Tampax dispensers in the boys' bathrooms, but they're the party of science. Okay.
Yeah, the problem is they don't actually know what science is. They believed Fauci when Fauci famously said, "I am the science." Fauci was wrong about everything.
Everything. No, we didn't really prep for that. But where do you think this is going? Because in the end, this egotistical older gentleman who finally got the spotlight, a career long bureaucrat, got the spotlight and effed up everything he did was wrong. Is there any repercussions for this, or is it just going to be an asterisk in the history books?
It's
What he
just
dragged the country through completely, not completely, by most in most cases unnecessary, and
yeah,
maybe
it's
even prolonged things.
I don't think it prolonged anything. It did make the economic recovery a lot worse. But if and this is something that absolutely amazes me that nobody talks about. If you turn the clock back 100 years to the Spanish flu pandemic, there was no vaccine, there was no social distancing. They did mask, but other than they didn't shut anything down. And granted, there were a lot fewer people at the time. But if you take a look from the time the pandemic was determined to be a major pandemic to the time it subsided, it is almost exactly the same amount of time from when COVID was determined to be a pandemic to the time the pandemic was declared to be
Very
over.
interesting and 100% correct. And by the way, yes, there were fewer people back then, but it was a 1-2 punch. World War I followed by that because it had huge. The death toll was tremendous,
Yes.
but in the end, it was almost the same bell curve that had to run its course.
Yes.
Interesting. You think the esteemed doctor might have known that or studied history?
You would think that, but I mean, again,
I
I
think he
think
loved throwing pitches out at the Nationals game, even though he missed the plate.
Fauci was concerned about two things, and neither one of them was the American people. And we know this for a fact because we have the emails that said this. His biggest concern was he did not want to admit that this was created in a lab because he was concerned it would hinder funding for scientific research. This was his first thing. And the second thing he was concerned about was his own profile. He had his 15 minutes in the sun and he wasn't giving that up for anything.
I think that was huge. I'm no psychologist, but I think you had a guy, in his 80s, I believe, always under the radar. It was in administrations from the 70s, and he was Mick Jagger, Elvis Presley, and Paul McCartney rolled into one, and he was not going to let that go. He was it. He was the queen bee.
Yeah, I think that's what it came down to. And to be fair, that's what most of what we've been discussing comes down to. Fauci wanted his moment in the sun. Ben and Jerry's wanted to prove they're still relevant. Biden doesn't want to give up running because he wants the spotlight of being president, so-called leader of the free world. It's all about the ego.
I agree, and it's really interesting you say that. Biden and his family blame a lot of it on his wife. For the good of the country, they should go away. But that's for another issue, and we don't want to beat a dead
Right.
horse.
But
They did
again,
approve. Go
none
ahead.
of these people has the good of the country in their hearts and minds. They're all about their own egos and what's in it for them.
I agree, my friend. We also had the approval of cluster bombs in to be used in the Ukraine. One thing that does give me pause and makes me a little nervous is when you have Weekend at Bernie's in charge, there's no one there's no leader that is president that has any judgment that's making any calls. It's all underlings, the head of this, the head of that, Joint Chiefs, whatever it is. It's not Biden, or if he is making calls, doesn't have the cognitive ability to kind of rationalize it through. And I also think we don't have a president that can connect. You don't have to like the guy with Putin and maybe put a stop to this. So that does bother me. And also bothers me that of all the things we have to worry about, including a potential nuclear war, you have John Kerry concerned about the implications on the climate from this war. Another true genius
Yeah.
as he flies around in his private jet.
Yes, John Kerry, the climate
A
czar,
moron. A moron.
flying around in a private jet complaining that the war in the Ukraine is exacerbating climate change. Really? You have people dying. The country of Ukraine is in ruins, and your concern is about the CO2 emissions from the planes and bombs going off. Really? How out of touch do you have to be? There are people dying. And he's like, "Oh, but it's going to ruin the environment and it's going to, cause more climate change." Really? This
Well,
needs to stop. I
something.
mean,
He is an example of basically being a cad as well as white privilege. I don't know who his family was because the guy, I know he went to Harvard, does not seem particularly bright. And basically, he's made his entire fortune on skimming off the backs of people he either had relationships with or people he married, like Heinz.
yeah, I mean, I remember saying this years ago, uh when John Kerry was Secretary of State.
Yep, genius.
I made the comment, how can we expect him to convince our allies and adversaries of anything, he couldn't even convince the American people to vote for him for president over George W. Bush.
That is says it in a nutshell. I believe there are basically seagoing animals that could convince the world that they should be better, would be better leaders than George W. Bush. But yeah, and also he was so funny because he just took the blows during the whole Swift boat, didn't even respond. It was just pathetic.
Yeah, he's another one of these old politicians that needs to go away. And Lord knows there are enough of them on both sides of the aisle. I honestly think we need to have a mandatory retirement age in the government. And I mean, I think we actually do for regular government workers. I think they are actually required to retire at 65. But in the Senate, the House, we need them to get out there by age
Oh, come
70,
on.
they need
Dianne
to
Feinstein's
retire.
completely grounded.
Oh, sure.
Yep. She makes Biden look like Tolstoy.
Yeah, and people see what's going on. I mean, again, even the liberal media is going against Biden now, saying you cannot run for a second term. I think the best thing I've read recently was an editorial in the Wall Street Journal that said the best thing for this country is to get rid of Biden and Trump, whose combined age is over 160.
I think beyond the age, I think politically, if they both go away, but there is some hope about Trump because I got some information that at this time Trump was, everything was going to be Jeb Bush. Talk
Yep.
about other electoral cycles that the actual winner wasn't even on the radar. So hopefully Trump will go away because I believe almost anyone in the Republican Party would destroy Biden.
Yeah,
Besides,
it
DeSantis is
is.
the other. I don't think he's going anywhere anyway. But some of the others, like just Rasmani, hard to pronounce. The Val Ramswamy,
Yeah,
he's Indian. He's now in third place and has 8%. He would electrocute Biden in a debate. It would be man against boy. They'd have to call it. They'd have to throw in the towel.
well, I mean, anybody is going to destroy Biden in the debate. But at this point in 2008, Obama was not on the map. He was
Hillary was a
actually
clear cut
he might have
leader. Yes,
been doing as well as DeSantis right now. The front runners never materialized. So same thing. Trump in 12 2016 rather, uh, wasn't even a blip at this point. He was a running joke. So I don't think any of the polls right now have any real meaning on either
agreed.
side of the aisle. It's way too early to tell. And again, remember, it also in 2020, at this point, it looked like Kamala Harris was going to be going gangbusters. She didn't even make it to Iowa.
Yeah, I also think I heard Chris Christie on one of the Sunday shows, and I thought he made a lot of sense. I'm sorry to say, but he had complete gloves off on Trump. I think in the debate, because it's his only chance anyway, if Trump shows up. I think if Trump doesn't show up, that's going to hurt him because it's going to show him as a coward. He's got to show up to the debate. I know it's a calculation that, you got what, 6 against 1, whatever it is, but he's got to show up. And if he does, and even if he doesn't, Chris Christie, who I don't think is going to win, but lays it on the line when it comes to Trump. He's the Trump killer.
Yeah, I don't think Chris Christie can win.
No,
Well,
I agree 100%.
I certainly don't think he can win a general. I don't think he can win a primary. But Chris Christie's job, and I think he actually understands this, is He's the guy laying on the barbed wire so everybody else can get over it. He's the
Good.
one taking on Trump head on, face to face, so that the others can get more attention, so that they can
Well
talk
done
about the
analysis.
issues.
And I think he's doing his civic duty. How does that sound?
And I mean, Trump took on 6-1 odds in the Republican primaries in 2016. I don't think that's a big deal. If he does not show up, he's going to be labeled a coward, and it's going to be very hard for him to start recovering because at
Huge
that
miscalculation. I
yes,
agree with you 1000%. He shows up, he's got, you know what, he's got some ho-hos. If he doesn't show up, he's a wussy boy. Not good. You can throw
ex-
all the bullshit he wants out about his, 8 against 1, whatever it is. Yes, it is, but who cares? You need to show up, put your big boy pants on, and cowboy it up.
exactly. If you're going to be in the race, you have to be in the race. I mean, realistically, if he avoids the debate, how is that any different from Biden hiding in the basement?
There's zero difference. And
Right.
something? He loses another arrow in the quiver because that argument goes right out the effing door.
Yep.
Speaking of going out the door, Biden could be going out the door. There's more and more, which I didn't really think would happen. A lot more activity, a lot more there about Biden and his corruption. In fact, there's a recent poll that 56% of those polled, totally reliable poll, believe that Biden in some way took bribes. You see it even in some of the liberal media. I don't know if it doesn't have some Velcro there. I don't know if some of this isn't going to stick. Your thoughts?
I
There's
believe
too
it.
much there.
Yeah, I
There's too
believe
much
it is
shit.
going to stick because Biden thought this was all going to go away when Hunter took the plea deal. And I honestly believe that Biden pushed the DOJ to give him the plea deal. He said the White House official line is they had nothing to do with it. But let's face it, Merrick Garland has been walking lockstep with Biden
He's
the
a
whole
stooge,
time.
yes. Political hack.
But I think they thought he was going to take the plea and that was going to be the end of it. It was going to go away. And then more IRS whistleblowers came out. And then the cocaine at the White House came out. And Hunter Biden is just the gift that keeps on giving for
Yes,
the
yes. And
Republican
with the thing
Party.
about the cocaine that is at the White House, I mean, the White House really believes, or is ever those people in charge at least, that we're really dumbasses. Because, like I said, you have a party, you have the convent, the nuns from the convent over, you have the teachers union over, and you have Keith Richards. And guess what? There's drugs left. I wonder where it came from. The point
But
is, but on a serious note, the there is that if it is Hunter's cocaine, which I actually believe it is, then all those plea deals go out the window.
the plea deals go out the window. The whole idea that the Biden family has been standing by Hunter in his time of recovery goes out the
It's all
window.
shit, yes.
It, it,
And by
it
the way, I don't know if you happen to see this. There's clips of him on the porch, I guess, of the White House looking at the fireworks, and he looks pretty coked out to me. That's not conspiracy theory. That's just observation. He's
it
all
is absolute.
sweaty. He's all manic. He's out of his mind.
Yeah, I think all of this is going to have legs because there's too much there. And I'm actually going to steal a line from Jon Stewart. He used this when he was on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert about COVID. He was talking about the Wuhan lab. And he said to Colbert, he said, if an outbreak of chocolatey goodness occurred in Hershey, Pennsylvania, you wouldn't think it was unrelated to Hershey. It is absolutely unacceptable that these people keep saying, "Oh, the novel COVID strain happened. There was no relation to the lab in Wuhan." You have a known Coke user in the White House, and Coke shows up. Gee, Where do you think it came from?
Yeah. Plus, we kind of might have alluded to this. At least I totally believe this, that he's not a very stable individual. That's not a good thing. I mean, that's sad. But I think with the increasing pressure, I believe he's going back to his old ways because I think it's the walls
Yeah,
are closing in on him. But I think this thing's. I think the corruption, the bribes, the hunter. It's really like the white trash family, and I think it does have some legs, especially because the mainstream media and those that are the faithful party leaders in the Democrat want know this guy is not ready for prime time. If you need any more assurance of that or support for that, go look at his beach ball volley, whatever. No, the beach videos of him pushing a chair like someone who's senile.
yeah. No, we have seen the turning. There have been stories on MSNBC about how he should not run for reelection and how he should be ashamed of himself for ostracizing his seventh grandchild. You've seen stories on CNN about the same thing. He's not capable of running. The Atlantic ran a story. The New York Times ran a story about how he should be embarrassed about how he's treating his seventh grandchild and
Yeah, I
how
mean,
he's
that goes to the whole thing
it's
of
like,
the Uncle Joe and
yes,
Amtrak Joe. He's really an SOB. We said this during the Afghan withdrawal when he's looking at his watch. And also, one of the public, it could have been the New York Times, was talking about how people are scared to be in the room with him
yeah,
because of his outbursts. Again, that
you've
might be dementia related. I always thought he was a son of a bitch, but I think with the dementia and all his mental decline, I think that he just goes off on people.
yeah, Politico did a whole story on how his staffers try to avoid being alone with him, how he's abusive. And I mean, it's absolutely hypocritical because you've also seen gone viral the video from when he first got elected, how he was saying everybody had to be treated well. And if he found out that any member of his staff was being abusive, they would be fired immediately. Well, again, do as I say, not as I do.
Is
At
there something
this
called self-firing? I don't know.
yeah, at this
But
point, the only people who seem to be still die hard in the Biden corner are the ladies on The View.
which I mean, that's you need to get most of your information from the views we talked about. Jerry Springer, his audience probably has a IQ of maybe 85 because some of them might be college kids smoking joints. The View, wow! I'd love to have a focus group with people from who are viewers of The View. Wow, the
Yeah,
bandwidth wouldn't be impressive.
but even then, I cannot remember the name of the woman, but she's the conservative representative on The View.
Hmm.
Even she is sitting there saying to the other women as they're saying, "Oh, it's nobody's business how Joe Biden treats his grandchildren. We should the public doesn't need to know this." And the conservative representative was saying, "If this were Donald Trump, we would be talking about it."
Of course. But it also is bigger than that. You talk about people's attitudes. Another recent poll 85% of those polled, only 15% think the country is going in the right direction. 85%. I mean, that harkens back. That's worse than the Carter years.
Well, you know what? We have to give credit where credit is due. Biden said he was going to unite the country. He didn't
And
say
then that way he
how.
has.
And 85% of the country believes we're going in the wrong direction. When was the last time 85% of Americans agreed on anything?
Probably not even after Pearl Harbor. How does that sound? So yes, in that regard, he has unified the country, but that is abysmal. 15, but they're diehard nutcase liberals that would think anything a liberal did was great. So only 15%. Wow, that's
Well,
disturbing.
let's, think of this as a Venn diagram. If you take a circle that represents the American people, a circle that represents the Democratic Party, and a circle that represents the watchers of The View. Where those three circles intersect, that's the 15%.
100% agreed with that, and maybe a little corner for like Jerry Springer. I like just throwing him in there. Um, Also, we have that Cornell West. He's a leading African American activist. He's also running for president. I don't really recall which party, or what independent party I should say. Basically, mirroring what other people have said, or echoing, I should say, that the new Democratic Party is a party of war. I actually do agree with that. Even though they do everything to undermine our military, they never met a conflict or an engagement they didn't like.
Yeah, it's a weird dichotomy with the Democrats and war, because yes, they do tend to support it. However, this is not new. And as our listeners know, we broadcast this from Connecticut, and former Connecticut Senator Joe Lieberman was actually pushed out of the Democratic Party because he supported the war in Iraq. And he ended up winning as an independent because that part of the Democratic Party, even here in deep blue Connecticut, was a bunch of morons who didn't know what they were talking about. But now Joe Lieberman is a leading voice in no labels. So you're seeing that more moderate Democratic voice lean more independent. We've seen it coming for quite a while. And I think the left, they want to support Ukraine primarily because one, they don't want to be seen as colluding with Russia, because Lord knows they've thrown that around enough. And
Mm-hmm.
B, and the second reason I think the left really wants to support Ukraine is because they know the Ukraine's got dirt on Hunter Biden. They don't want that getting out.
100%. The only thing I always thought about is, why doesn't Putin, he hates Biden, vice versa. Why doesn't he get that stuff out there? He must have privy to some things Biden related.
I think honestly, looking at the fact that the Wagner group had that brief rebellion, the fact that there was another member of Putin's close cabinet speaking out against him, I don't think Putin's grasp on power is what everybody thinks it is. I think it's very tenuous. And I also don't think that Putin is that much more coherent than Biden.
Which
So
has its own
yes,
dangerous
which makes the world a
ramifications.
very dangerous place when the two most
Yes,
powerful leaders are both batshit crazy.
I would agree with that. Now, on the political realm, or continuing on some of the political realm, DeSantis, a lot of editorial, a lot of chatter about, is his star sinking? Well, it is definitely sinking, but is it? I'll use a term. I don't think it really is, but permanently sunk. I think that he's just laid a big fart on the political stage. He's got no traction. Every week he slips either, significantly or at least to some degree. I think he should have waited.
I don't think the fact that he's slipping in the polls has anything to do with him. I think, 100% is a finite number. So if somebody's going to move ahead, somebody else needs to move behind. You have more people in the race now. And every time the Democrats and the liberals take another swipe at an indictment on Trump or another attack on Trump, Trump's numbers go up, and they've got to come from somewhere. Right now, as we said earlier in the podcast, I don't think any of these numbers mean anything. I think DeSantis could still end up being the Republican nominee. I think Tim Scott could end up being the nominee. The numbers now are just too early, and based on history, we've never seen anybody who is leading this early actually be the candidate.
Agreed, but I need to follow up on something we've already talked about. If Trump blows off the debate in August, repercussions, please.
If Trump blows off the debate, rather, I think you're going to see a situation where all boats rise. I think you're going to see Trump's numbers go down because the diehard Trump supporters are not going to leave him. He's going to have them. But you're going to cut into everybody else who was going, sure, I'll vote for him. They're going to start looking at all of the other candidates. And I think you'll see most of the other candidates go up by a point or two, but it's going to be spread out.
Interesting. We'll keep posted on that. And finally, one of our favorite people, Zuckerberg, has launched his Twitter killer as he gets more and more. And it was called the cage match between him and his arch enemy there from Twitter. Your thoughts?
Yeah, the mainstream media jumped on the Threads story, Threads being the new Twitter killer, allegedly. Threads is not going to be a Twitter killer. And I will explain exactly why. Threads is less than a week old, and it is already censoring people. There are a number of
Well,
conservative.
Zuckerberg can't help himself.
Yeah, there are a number of conservative voices that have Threads accounts. And if you go to follow them, you get a warning saying, are you sure you want to follow this account? These people are known to spread misinformation. And quite frankly, most of the misinformation is coming from Zuckerberg. But I had a situation with Meta just today. I actually have several Instagram accounts. I have one for my coaching business. I have one to promote the podcasts in our media properties. I have one that's a personal account. And then I have one private account that I can put bad jokes on, that I can, make comments on, that it's just a small group of friends. It's not for the general public. So my bad jokes don't get seen by my clients.
I gotcha.
Well, last night I posted a joke about guns. And this morning I woke to find that account suspended. When you can't even post a joke, and I will tell you the joke, you may not find it funny. A lot of people did, but it was a simple meme that said, guns don't kill people, people kill people. So if you have people in your home, make sure you have them locked up properly.
Okay, yeah, okay.
Okay.
Harmless, pretty, but no, I'll give you my honest opinion. Pretty benign.
Right.
It's a joke.
Yes.
Not particularly
it's
funny,
a joke.
just kidding.
Right. I mean, it's not, I'm not saying it's the best of joke, but it was mildly amusing.
Exactly, yes.
Meta decided that had to be censored and the account taken down because of that joke. So they're doing the same censorship on Threads as long as any social media platform focuses on censorship. And Zuckerberg himself said, oh, it's going to be a safe space where people can just be happy. It's like, well, that means you're censoring people, okay? So as long as he's going to keep censoring, it's never going to kill Twitter.
Well done. Well, Dr. Lopkin, another show in the bucket. And we will not be back next week, but we'll be back the following week. And we are appreciative of all our listeners. We have a growing listenership, and they can contact us if they'd like, correct?
Yes, you can contact us on the Facebook page for Carnivore Radio. You can contact us at xvadio.com/connect. Fill out the email form there. Let us know what you're thinking. And of course, while you're there, you can listen to every episode of Carnivore Bites, as well as the rest of the Xvadio podcast network, which, by the way, is celebrating its 10th anniversary this month. So go ahead
Fantastic.
and listen to Carnivore Bites and the rest of the network at xvadio.com/podcasts, the Carnivore Radio website, the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Audible, Amazon Music, and other platforms that respect freedom of speech.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin, and thank our listeners.
We'll see you next time.